that is really, really good news. Number to call if you want to join the program, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. And, well, it's often said about Jesus, this what upset the Pharisees the most is that he was eating and drinking with tax gatherers and sinners. That's where they found him. Now, and these folks, these tax gatherers and these sinners, they were attracted to Christ. It was more that he was having dinner with them than they were having dinner with him than he was having dinner with them. They wanted to be where he was. There was something attractive and magnetic about him and his obvious genuine concern for them, genuine concern for them as people. And so this is exactly what's going on up in Sturgis now. The Hellfighters, Bikers for Christ folks, they're hanging out where the tax gatherers and the sinners, and the word sinner in the gospel there just refers to those that were non-religious people. They were not practicing their faith. They were not involved in synagogue. They were not involved in memorizing the Torah. That's why they were called sinners, and that's where Christ was found, and that's where our friends like Craig and others and Donnie Smith from AFA are found this week up in Sturgis. So we really appreciate them taking the time to come on the program with us. So number to call if you want to join the program is 888-589-8840. I want to talk just for a minute about the sale of, you're aware by now, of the Washington Post to the guy that owns Amazon. Now, it's a personal purchase, so it was purchased by the guy that actually owns or founded Amazon. His name is Jeff Bezos. I think that's how you say his last name, Bezos or Bezos. I'm not exactly sure how you say it. But, you think about this just for a moment. This is the thing that kind of cracked me up thinking about it. There's a whole raft of sort of ancillary kind of issues that surround this sale. But, the Washington Post it's the toniest, along with the New York Times, it is the most elite newspaper in the country. And the Washington Post, they broke the Pentagon Papers. It was Woodward and Bernstein at the Washington Post that brought down President Nixon. They have made their bones being on the cutting edge of investigative journalism. And they fancy themselves as the elite of the elite. And the New York Times fancies themselves the elite of the elite. You talk about the top two newspapers in the country, everybody would say Washington Post and New York Times. 1 and 2. Those would be the top two. And now this thing has sold for $250 million, which means that the Washington Post has lost 87% of its value in the last 10 years. If the thing had sold 10 years ago, it would have been worth about 9 times what it sold for. Would have been worth a couple of $1 billion. I think its value was $1.8 billion, something like that, just a decade ago. So the Washington Post, a premier, dead tree, old media, mainstream media newspaper, has lost almost 90% of its value in the last decade. So $250 million, that is just a pittance and is overpriced at that. I got an article here indicating that the purchase price for the Washington Post was 17 times its adjusted profit. So the $250 million purchase price represents a figure that is 17 times the profit of the Washington Post. Now, typically, this is a piece by Edmund Lee and Brooks Sutherland at Bloomberg. I did an interview with him, by the way, on the cost of the economy of homosexual marriage. If I get a chance, I'll tell you what I told Bloomberg about that this morning. But the current market value for major metropolitan newspapers is about 3 or 4 times its profit. That would be the normal asking price for a major metropolitan newspaper. You look at its profit, you multiply that by 3 or 4 times, and that becomes the market value of that newspaper. Jeff Bezos paid 17 times the profit mark. This is 4 times what this newspaper is worth. It's actually about a $50 or $60 million newspaper, the Washington Post. That's all it's worth. Yeah, that's all it's worth on the market is about $50 or $60 million. So he paid a friendship premium in order to own the Washington Post. A friendship premium of about $200 million. All he needed to match market price was to offer $50 million. Now, clearly what the Graham family is doing is they're clearing out while the newspaper is still worth something. And you have to wonder if the New York Times, a lot of speculation this morning about the New York Times being the next newspaper to sell while it's still worth something, because they got to look at what's happening in the Washington Post, representing the plummeting value of that newspaper. The multiple of the 17 times adjusted profit would mean the New York Times would be worth about $4 billion, which is about twice its current market value. That gives you an idea of how much Jeff Bezos overpaid for the Washington Post. So the New York Times now, its worth is down to about $2 billion, about what the Washington Post was about a decade ago. So you got to wonder if the New York Times is going to sell. But you think about this just for a second, that right now you've got the same guy, Jeff Bezos, owning the Washington Times, that sells the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine lunchbox on the Amazon website. Same guy that owns the toniest newspaper in the country, the most elite newspaper in the country, is the same guy that sells Barbie Roll-On Lip Gloss on the Amazon.com website. And, it's interesting to watch the reaction of liberals. They're just completely scandalized by this. They don't know what to make of it. Now, the people at the Washington Post, they want to keep their jobs, so they've been polite, as you can understand. They don't want to offend the guy that just paid $250 million to become their boss. But this is the last thing. Liberals look at themselves. Honestly, ladies and gentlemen, they look at themselves as so far above us, so superior to us in intelligence, in education, in smarts. They honestly see themselves as in a completely different quadrant of humanity than the rest of us, a completely different tier than the rest of us. That's why they feel that they are the elite and they are entitled and should be making all of these important lifestyle decisions for us, because we are simply not smart enough, we're not bright enough, we're not educated enough to make these decisions for ourselves, so they have to make them for us. They honestly look at themselves this way, and this is just freaking them out. Here is the icon newspaper of the left, the flagship newspaper of the left, the Washington Post, in our nation's capital, the Pentagon Papers, all the president's men, bringing down President Nixon. This is their elite flagship newspaper, and now it's being owned by a guy that in the rest of his day sells the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine lunchbox. You cannot get any more plebeian than the Scooby-Doo Mystery Machine lunchbox. And yet the same guy that's selling that is now paying their salaries at the Washington Post. The same guy selling Barbie Roll-On Lip Gloss is now paying salaries of the journalist at the most elite newspaper in the country. And they are just absolutely scandalized by this. And it just cracks me up. So you've got the fading glory here of the mainstream media. Now, the interesting thing is this Jeff Bezos guy, he said, I don't know where the story is, I had it here, but he said a number of years ago that in 20 years, nobody's going to be buying newspapers anymore. Newspapers are going to be history. In 20 years, they'll be sort of an antique item. They'll have sort of some nostalgic value, but that's it. So he said in 20 years, he said this about 8 or 9 years ago, and 20 years from now, nobody's going to be buying newspapers. Newspapers are going to completely go out of print. And you got to figure with the rise of social media, with the expansion of the internet, things are not looking better for print media. So I think probably what this Jeff Bezos guy is looking at doing is moving this thing to a completely digitally based news source, and then trying to hide content behind the paywall and increase internet advertising and so forth. But he, it's interesting that this is probably going to be the end. This marks the end probably of conventional newspapers. New York Times probably going to be the next to go. And if you wonder about the political outlook of Jeff Bezos, he gave the largest single donation to support gay marriage in the state of Washington that has ever been given in the history of the world. $2.5 million to support sodomy-based marriage. Focal point AFR Talk.